Guys, it's time for part 3 of Grubby versus Sheth in Day 9 Daily number 407, where we learn to be a better gamer. We're appreciating Grubby's ability to pretty much be awesome in a lot of regards. His expand timing at the start of the game, the amount of harassment and aggression that he's been doing, and a lot of the interesting unit composition choices that we saw in part 2 are helping him start the late game with this huge, gigantic lead. And I think in terms, as far as I've counted, there's only really been 2 major pushes in this area for Zerg. Maybe this was the 3rd one. There's been almost none, but in the meantime, we see that Grubby's been picking off this expansion. He's been blinking up here for drops to kill off the Spire. He's been staying very, very, very active. And we see Naniwa do this. We see Hero do this. The relentless aggression against the Zerg, while always having an opportunity to retreat, has been so instrumental for being able to maintain this lead. And again, we don't have any of the super late game pieces like High Templar, like tons of Immortals. We only have 2 of those. We mainly have a big-ass mid-game army, but with just a single mothership, we can step back into being aggressive again. As you'll see, the Observer's there, ready to blink at any time. There's a sentry here ready to tickle an Overlord that flies by. Yeah, I don't really know why that one's there. But this relentless aggression is so good. Now, at this point in time, you're seeing Grubby kill off an expansion, but what I will note is 2 things. As Grubby is attacking, even though he just got done defending what could have ended his top right corners, his top right expansions, right after that he's still attacking and expanding while attacking. Whenever he does a huge major push, that's when it's time to take another expansion. Also, if I just go off to this blank area up in the top left, I want you to look at the mini-map with me. It's very clear that if I draw this dividing line, there's a lot of purple to the left and a lot of green to the right. So if I were to say, where do you really want to attack as Protoss? I would just say these 2 expansions. If I can lock Zerg out of this base and lock him out of this base, then all I need to do is establish control of my 5th, and then I'll be happy. So Grubby, notice that he's not just attacking and expanding anywhere, he's attacking and expanding behind it. So if any Zerg units try to move through, they'll have to generally pass through this little corral, and Grubby's more than prepared with this Observer in front and center anyways. The Dark Templar continue to try to run around and do a little bit of harassment. But notice Grubby kills it off and just pulls right on back. Yeah! Pulling it right on back. Everything that happens in the late game, you can view every big action as a small action that happened in the early game. So this big action, Grubby ran up, killed off an expansion, and pulled back. That's the equivalent of, for instance, in the early game, moving forward with some Hellions and Marines and killing off a Creep Tumor and then pulling back. You want to just do a little bit of damage that gives you an edge and pull right on back. This replay is getting very, very close to done. But you're seeing, in terms of expansions, Sheth has had a really hard time getting up this one, and this one. Again and again and again, so many drops, and oh, look, cool. Oh, now we're just going to kill off this expansion. And what should Grubby do right now? Well, in all honesty, he really should pull back. If he wants to attack, he should just pull back here to mid and then push. Or push back from here to mid and push down here, because both of those help defend this expansion better. And that's what he does. Oh, I'm allergic to play that's this good. Wow. Anyways, final late game transitions, getting up Stormers. The last real big step that you should make with a lot of the play. And from this point in time, it's a pretty simple cleanup from Grubby. Picking off and expand, pulling back. Picking off and expand, pulling back. Coming to the Grubby cam. He's just poking and prodding at all these expansions. Getting watchtowers held. Holding in with Stalkers. Very easy. Season expansion here. Oh, well, I would love that expansion. Kills it off. Pulls right on back. Excellent. And he can easily bounce back and forth as he gets to 4K, 1.5K, and considering that he's pretty much only been building gateways for his whole life, he can easily replenish back up the units that he needs. I will give you the satisfaction of seeing the ending of this. Yeah! Hey, look. It's the first Broodlord sighting we've seen. But I don't know, they just disappeared right before my eyes. Yay! Alright. Now, I know a lot of you love Archon toilets. You love just hurling all sorts of units into the vortex with some Archons. But that's not quite as important as the fact that Grubby just has cloaked units. As you can see, Sheth has this lone Overseer, and if all the Overseers get picked off, there is nothing that you can really do about it as Zerg, other than just pray to God you have some fungals. So, I really liked this game because it was kind of long and dramatic and had great opening, a lot of good decisions in the mid-game, but I think the most interesting decision to me in the entire game was this one that happened right here at the 18-minute mark, I think. Yeah, when Grubby moved up here and committed to an attack, he was clearly in a great spot with 4 bases on the way, with Blink and another Colossus on the way, but he was put into a position where he could not possibly retreat at all. There was literally no opportunity to retreat. I don't think there was anything necessary about this play to try to kill off this base, other than something like, oh yeah, I thought I had way more units than he did and thought I could just win with this push. As it turned out, Grubby was incorrect, but and I don't mind that choice if you're convinced you are correct, but I still like the idea of waltzing up at an angle, like from here, or maybe from the center angle, and just pulling back. And as we can see, this is the part where Grubby looked most like he was going to lose. This was the scariest part in the entire game for Grubby, when all these roaches were up. And this is a feel that you see a lot if you're Protoss, you feel it a lot, where you're in a good position and you just lose that one army, and then you're super dead. You just instantly die. But the best part about Grubby is that with this positioning, we see how Sheth was able to stay alive, or excuse me, how Grubby was able to stay alive against this huge push coming in from Sheth. Damn it. We see how Grubby was able to stay alive despite this huge push coming in from Sheth, and how Grubby was able to continue to set forward. So that's the moment that I probably liked most out of this entire game. And again, that was the first big attack that Sheth did all game long, and other than that, yeah, I guess this is attempt number 2, but even then, there's not really that much pressure that's going on. Zerg's just sort of existing outside the front. It's only once Zerg really starts drilling this north expansion that we see some real scariness. Yeah, there's the second attack ever from Sheth this game, which I think is a real role reversal. Normally it's the Protoss who's just like, defending and freaking out and crying and everything terrible's happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the infamous Markio question grabber. We're going to take some questions, and then I'm just going to go, because I'm going to have to do some epic, ridiculous casting with none other than a Rob. Literally none other than that man right there. All right, let's see if the question. You see him? You see him? Hey. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm trying to cover up my pit stains. Zing! All right. Is the question grabber? Is there no question grabber in the Oh, thank goodness. Let me see here. Questions about the game. I'm getting questions about my taste in music and about if they can keep the mothership in Heart of the Swarm. Because you're the one who controls that, right?
I make the final.
Rob makes the final call. Rob actually sits upon a.
I mean, we said that it was just too big. Like, I don't. It's just, you know, it's strictly a space issue.
Yeah, Rob.
It's not even a decision to make. Like, it's just.
There's not enough
doesn't fit.
megabytes on hard drives to store it. Rob actually sits upon a throne of the code that was
out.
The throne consists of the code that's used to enable LAN and chat channels and, you know, just stuff that's generally used for furniture. And he says things like, he just throws out a word and they have to make a unit for it. The Persnigitator. On it. All right, what is there? Let's see here. Let's see here. Sergeant York says, Day 9, do you think Zerg could have been more successful with a drop in the toss main instead of moving after that expansion? You know, I think that question really highlights an important step in learning, which is there's a difference between making a decision in-game versus trying to fix an adjustment between games. In game, Sheth almost certainly has played this style hundreds or thousands of times. This Roach into Mutiling, intending on going Broodlord, Infester, Roach. He's probably done that so many times and had aggression work well at so many times that you just get in the habit of doing that again and again and again. And when your opponent expands somewhere else, you don't drop this whole well-practiced, beautifully timed game plan. You try to figure out ways to make it work. And I think that in-game, Sheth was correct, given his experience, to continue the way he played. Now that we're between games and looking and analyzing, I would say that drops, I think, are going to become increasingly like the norm for Zergs, or at the very least Niter Swarms, which are a little bit better at transporting mass armies in and out quickly. Because I think that Protosses are finally halting that role of being the defender. All I'm going to do is sit around all day and wait till I have a death ball, and instead it's being the Protoss is the aggressor and the Zerg's the defender. And what's the best way to do that? Counter-aggression, drops and Niter Swarm, and Mutalisks are the three best ways to do it, I guess, in Zergling counterattacks. I guess in switching races. But I really enjoyed that joke. I thought that was great. I'm really proud of myself. Yes, this is what happens when I have an audience of one live. But yeah, I would say that that's definitely the next place I would explore if I were Sheth. It may be something. I think that probably the best that Sheth could get away with is making it harder for the Protoss to secure that fourth base. Probably it's going to be hard to shut down the 3. Let me see. Lupus X says, Day 9, I've heard that Zerg always needs to stay one base ahead of Protoss. Is that a general rule you should trust? A more generalizable rule is that if you're expanding a lot, you should be defending a lot. If you're expanding not very much, you should be attacking a lot. Those should be sort of like inversely proportional. So, yeah, I think it generally winds up that Zerg is one base ahead of Protoss, but for instance, when I come to this period in the game, well, actually let me rewind right before the big attack happened, right, bam, to here, where Sheth is now establishing control of a fourth base and is looking really comfortable. He's about to get his hive, his upgrades are churning, he has his spire up. 2 minutes later, we see the infestation pit's done, hive's going to start in just a sec. The fact that Protoss has a fourth base doesn't really matter so much for Sheth. Sheth has 8 geysers up and running, so he's going to be very comfortable getting all the hive tech that he really needs. So I would say that, yeah, it does wind up that way. It's not a rule, though. And there, I don't think, is a good rule that relates to how many bases he has versus how many bases I have that I'd be comfortable saying at the very least. Yeah. Oh, Elite Mantis, great question, Day 9. Why do we see Zerg players in PvZ doing Forge expands nowadays and no more Sentry expands nowadays? Isn't being more aggressive earlier allowing for easier expand as well? I'm going to answer 2 different things. First of all, players are doing expands with no sentries at all when they early expand by seeing the gas timing of the Zerg. And when you go Forge expand and you see no gas, you can easily get away with building just Zealots and Stalkers. I don't want to say that being aggressive earlier is better or worse. It's just very different, and you have to play it out differently. A lot of players have a strong preference for the 2-base openings because one of the easiest ways to win a game is just to have more stuff than he does. And if his macro ever slips at any point, you get a win with Protoss there. And vice versa. Plus, you kind of heard me say it's much easier to figure out how to defend than it is to figure out all the weird, crazy times to attack. But the big thing that I would say is if you Forge expand, you're going to be up against almost always a 3-base player. And there's nothing you can really do about those 3 bases popping up early on. And if you are against, or if you do the sentry expand, you're almost always going to be up against a 2-basing player. It's really hard for him to get a third without you just walking your units over there and killing it off. But if you're having that fear of, ooh, I'm sitting around too long and I'm not hitting the Zerg hard, don't worry about that at all. The important thing is, as long as you're doing something between like the 8 and 10 minute mark when you early expand, fantastissimo. Love it. Last question. Last question. Last one. Zamium says, Day 9, I've been noticing you love it when players expand when they apply some pressure that is not that threatening, but may appear that way. Is this correct? Bet your ass it's correct. One of the most important concepts in any competitive game is the idea of guaranteed damage, where it's so easy to get overexcited and to go for the big kill and to forget about doing all the little tiny things. Where you'll see a lot of fighting game players who are really responsible about just throwing out a jab here and there, not trying to get the crazy ultra combo that kills them off in a lot of amazing ways. They know how to do that, and more importantly, they know all the little tiny, just like, boom, where I just throw a jab out and shut down an attack and just do a little bit of damage. Like, these types of pokes are so important because the extreme opposite end is where your opponent is completely vulnerable and you just don't do anything and he gets away with it. It makes your opponent always have to have an answer at all points in time, period. One of the most common questions I get asked in this format is something like, let me see here, where, how do I want to say it? That's a really weird idea. Give me a second. I'm going to drink my water. You'll hear me talk about what you need to worry about at a lot of points of time as Zerg. You know, like, you'll hear me say things like, well, you know, given this mix, you've got to be really worried about Warp Prism Harass. And then at this point, he has to be really, really worried about some switch to air. He's got to be really worried about the Protoss taking this and this. And a lot of times I'm listing 3 or 4 things to worry about at any given point in time. Or even from the reverse side, you'll hear me say something like, yeah, if you build a Void Ray and you kill off all his scouting units in the middle, he has to worry that you're going to go for a 7-gate all-in or something like that. He has to plan for it. And people always ask me this follow-up. What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't worry about it? I know he has to worry about an attack right now and build some spine crawlers. I know he has to worry about me getting air units and build some spore crawlers here. But what if he just doesn't do that and he gets away with it and then I end up losing? The answer is all these little pokes, this non-committal aggression,